Welcome to Jewish meditation. This is summer meditation, and we studied the Omer for like 7 weeks straight. And excuse me, there you go. And we had a topic to discuss every week because the Omer Sephira chart gave us different kinds of ideas to mesh together. And now I wanted to get in the summer into a little bit of what's called Musar, which is Jewish ethical practice and study. So the rabbis, they have this very well-known saying, this very well-known teaching, that there is no reward in this world for a mitzvah, only in the world to come. And the world to come is considered like the spiritual world. And this is because the intensity of the spiritual realm is such that even a small taste of it would be infinitely more satisfying than anything we can merit or experience on earth. So the rabbis, the way Rabbi Elihu Dessler, who explained this teaching, says that even if we had all of the rewards and all of the merits and all of the experiences of the history of, as he says, the history of man, the history of humanity, it would still pale in comparison to just the fleeting pleasure of the world to come, the spiritual realm. And so in Musar, it's not simply enough to believe in the spiritual realm or practice meditation or a spiritual life, but sort of the knowledge of it is very important as well. And by understanding it, by perceiving it intellectually, we start to experience it as well. The one bleeds into the other. So only by studying, meditating, creating that alternate reality for ourselves, we touch the spiritual. We can know for sure that way that the material is inadequate, fleetingly pleasurable as it may be. So when we sit in a quiet space and we sit with our own conscience and our own mind, it becomes immediately apparent that the shoes we're wearing, the car we drove here, the clothes that we're wearing or that we ordered or whatever, they mean nothing when we're meditating. And if our goal is to experience the spiritual when we meditate, if our goal is to have the experience of meditating infuse itself into our lives, then our overall goal would be to have less of an attachment to the material world. So it's interesting just to think about how quickly we shut off our material inclination when we meditate or when we chant. We immediately perceive that, the spiritual realm is much higher and much stronger than the material realm. But which realm do we usually respond to? We know the answer to that. So Musar, the study of Jewish ethics, it's intended to shape our minds so we can, or we will come to feel that knowledge we acquire is true within us, and not only cognitively know it. So we're going to use the practice of chant and silent meditation to enter this reality, spiritual reward never being eclipsed by the material. And Musar is wonderful because it allows sort of steps along the path, and Musar is also a Jewish ethical practice based upon the Sfirot, upon Kabbalah. So they're connected. In studying these qualities of God's divinity, we study our own capabilities in the human realm to experience the spiritual realm, to also deal with what it means to be a human being and to have wants and needs and desires, and to also sort of pursue and perceive how we can sort of lessen those over time, not necessarily squash them or quash them, but allow them to be less important. So Yedid Nefesh, a well-known chant that we do often in here, I thought to get us in the mood for a nice silent meditation, because the text is about a loving relationship between God and the Jewish people that we pursue God's love within Yedid Nefesh, that we we take in this idea that God and the Jewish people have like a loving relationship, and that we seek out spiritual sustenance.
What does it mean,
Yedid Nefesh means friend of my soul, or soulmate, depending on how you
Does
translate.
Musar mean ethics?
Yes. Musar means ethics. Yedid Nefesh Avarachman Shochavta Eretzona Yarot Avda Kimo We're going to take this precious time that we've given ourselves now. Just take a few deep breaths to start with. There is no reward for a mitzvah in this world, only because the reward, by comparison, in the spiritual world is so much greater. There is no reward for the material in this world, only for the spiritual life. For the deep breaths we give ourselves. teaching tonight is about the Parsha. This week is one of the hardest Parshiot to pronounce. Beha'alotcha. Whenever I have students that have this Parsha, they kind of look at me quizzically and then try their best. And, or they say it like a question. Beha'alotcha. So there's so much that goes on in the Parsha, but purification ritual is one of the first things we read about. It's an important part of the Levitical rites and the cleanliness of the body as well. So a razor is supposed to pass over the entire body for a Levite before they perform their service, before they get sort of initiated into the rite of being a Levite. It's interesting as a comparison because the Nazarites, who are where Shimshon, Samson, comes from, to not cut the hair, to not shear anything off, to only be consecrated to God, to not drink alcohol, these different things. We have two famous examples of a Nazarite. A Nazarite could be Shimshon and also Jesus, right? So we think about Jesus being from Nazareth. The place Nazareth comes from Nazarite. So it's interesting to think about that relationship, of course. And so the Levites have the opposite. They're there to wash not only themselves, but the Kohanim, of course, we know. And it says in the text, very interesting, that the Levites themselves become an elevation offering. So they're the offering. Of course, they're not human sacrifices. They're somewhat of an offering to God because God says in the text that because God spared all the firstborn in Egypt, that basically the Levites are consecrated to God in replacement, because God didn't get to take the firstborn Israelites, chose not to. The Levites serve in the place of the firstborn Israelites. So they're somewhat of an offering, which is its own really fascinating thing, that a Levite has this like status of humility, that to be an offering in and of yourself. So what I say here, what I wrote down here is that we also must be willing to offer ourselves each day to God as Levites. You know, in a time when there are no Kohanim and Levites, except for when you call somebody to the Torah, we have to take on Levitical qualities, those who attach ourselves to service. So we distance ourselves from our own problems and remember to serve others. So if you're a Levite, your whole life and your whole job is to serve the Kohanim, is to serve the community, is to sing, where the Levites also sang in the choir. But this idea of purification, of service, is a really important part of our identity as Jews seeking a spiritual life. If we're seeking a spiritual life and we want to take the emphasis off of our own material inclination, or we call our Yetzer Hara, some people say evil inclination, it's really material inclination, we have to find a way to divert that energy somewhere else. And the somewhere else in temple times was these Levitical rites that they performed on behalf of the community. They served as dugmaot, as role models for the community. And so now we don't have these sort of ritual purification ceremonies. We don't have the awe of looking up at a temple, being able to go down, except you're in Yerushalayim, but still there's no temple, being able to go down to the plaza and looking up at the temple and having that awe-inspiring place to inspire you to lead a spiritual life, a center. Of course, the synagogue is a bit of a center, but it doesn't have the same type of awe inspiration that we think of the Western Wall. And so when we think of the actual people serving, who really did serve in these roles, who served other Jews, and who passed that tradition down to us, this is something that is another way for us to practice our Judaism, to practice the Levitical ideals of service to other people, service to the institution. And of course, when we serve, we think a lot less about our own issues. I think about serving um, when I was in college and doing Habitat for Humanity on a spring break and going and building houses for people. I thought so much less about my own problems that week than the rest of the entire year. Why? Because we got to meet the family we were building the house for. We were, focused on doing an enormous mitzvah. We were literally building community, literally, in many different ways. And so this is the kind of thing that I think we do service, not because it makes us feel good necessarily, but also because we know that it helps us build a spiritual life. So as we do just our sort of final chant, and then we'll sit for a little bit more, to think about this, putting yourself in this time of the Levitical rites, of somebody taking a razor, sort of this beautiful ritual of like shaving everything. Just like this, it almost feels like to be reborn, or the kind of thing that you would only do to a child, maybe, and an infant, like just a fascinating ritual that we can't really comprehend today, but it's necessary for us to think about what it means to go into the role of a servant, the role of somebody who serves others. Kol 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 haolam. The whole world is a very narrow bridge. Olam kulo. Kol 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 haolam. Haolam kulo. A very narrow bridge. The important thing is not to be afraid. Kol 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 haolam. Haolam kulo. Kol 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 haolam. Haolam kulo. Very narrow bridge. Yeah. So I think the idea here is that the straight and narrow path in life is extraordinarily difficult to stay on. It's extraordinarily difficult to find. And serving as a Levite, service, that's the straight and narrow. That's the Yetzer HaTov, the good within us, know we need to be doing. But one of the reasons Rabbi Nachman taught this particular parable, or this particular proverb, is because he knew how hard it was for human beings just to touch the spiritual. That's why he said the bridge is narrow. It's very easy to turn off, to become fearful, to become narcissistic, emotional. I would actually say that the opposite of emotional in some ways is spiritual, is groundedness. Grounded in the ineffable, grounded in what you know, is service. So the Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh was fond of doing walking meditations. May he rest in peace. He died a few months back. Let's try doing a walking meditation in our mind's eye here. In this bridge, wherever it's located. We're putting one foot in front of the other. Each plank a different intention. thing you think about a suspension bridge your whole life. Your decisions, your loved ones, imagine if we were as careful with every decision as we are, we would be walking across a narrow suspended bridge. Watch your whole life flash. You will be a totally different person by the time you reach the other side. A few more steps.
Just walk beside me and me, my fellow. Together we will walk in the ways of Hashem. Don't walk in front of me, I may not follow. Don't walk behind me, I may not lead. Just walk beside me and be my fellow. Together we will walk in the ways of Hashem. Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu 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 Adonai Echad.
Bring our hands together to heart center, and we'll chant the Shema as we end, as we normally do. Thank ourselves for having the practice to be here. Giving ourselves the time to change. Shema. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Thank everybody for being here tonight. We'll meet again next week, and then we'll be off until the couple middle weekends of July per the email. And we'll continue to talk about Musar and different concepts in Musar. And hopefully, those of you who are watching us, will send other emails. We can have some more people live, and we have lots of people watching us online too. Maybe we'll have another outdoor session if we have a Monday that's not going to be not in the 90s at night.
Or threatening to bring.
Or threatening to rain, that's true. So thank you, everybody.